Right, so the first TV debate due to host the leaders of 7 of the UK's political parties will now apparently be reduced to 6 because Keir Starmer is refusing to attend it. Tonight there's a head-to-head with Starmer versus Sunak, and clearly Starmer fancies his chances one-on-one with the current PM. The smaller parties, that under first past the post don't stand a chance of achieving power, well, he's running scared of those. Is it arrogance? That they don't deserve to bask in his presence? Is it fear? Or is he just calculated that he can get away with it because he's so cocksure that he's walking into number 10 next month?
I'm astonished that those that want to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom are pulling out of debates and out of scrutiny. I can see, based on what I've seen in the debates so far, why they want to do so, because this is a party that is out of ideas, out of purpose. They're tearing each other apart. And I think for millions of people, particularly with the heatwave today, they'll be saying, I want a government that's focused on the day job, that's getting on with resilience for today and tomorrow, for however long this heatwave goes on, and focused on the cost of living crisis. Instead, we've got fantasy economics. But as I say, pulling out of a TV debate when you want to be Prime Minister doesn't show very much confidence.
Right, so that was Keir Starmer telling us all how astonished he is that a Prime Minister wouldn't do a TV debate. That it doesn't show very much confidence, that it shows a lack of ideas, and they'd rather hide away than answer to the general public. There's always a video, there's always a tweet, there's always a memo somewhere, something that exposes that two-faced hypocrite and liar for what he is. And that is that this is him now, because he's now dodging scrutiny himself in an upcoming television debate. Yet he has no issue with debating Rishi Sunak one-on-one tonight, June the 4th. And the only reasonable conclusion I can come to for that is that clearly he has, well, nothing to fear in his mind from Sunak. Yet is vulnerable to the leaders of the smaller parties for some reason. Well, it's not hard to see why, is it? Sunak is finished, even with a solid performance against Keir Starmer, and I use that term in the loosest possible sense, as both leaders are awful orators and debaters. He won't gain anything. His policies are disgusting. His indulgence in petty and cruel culture wars, scapegoating vulnerable and minority people, sickens a lot of the general public with an ounce of empathy in their bodies. But crucially, from a policy perspective, there's barely any difference between what both men are putting to the country by way of an offer for people's votes. They're offering nothing different from each other. People are increasingly turned off of the both of them and the two main parties. So Starmer can get away with a poor performance in theory, whereas Sunak would need to pull off something astonishing to get any gain from this. We know Sunak is desperate. We also know he thinks he can get one up on Starmer. He did want to debate Starmer every single week of the election campaign, but certainly there's no incentive for him to take little Rishi's bait there, and the hypocrisy of that is exposed for both parties from that footage of Starmer I played for a moment ago, with Starmer running away from later debates. But of course the Tories were doing that previously, and now Sunak wants as many as possible. Well, shows how desperate he is, doesn't it? Their head-to-head tonight will be a slanging match, I'm predicting. I'm calling it now. Starmer will attack Sunak for his wealth, over hedge fund donors, over the failure of the last 14 years, austerity, the pandemic, all the rest of their failings. But policy attacks will be thin on the ground when they are basically on the same page as each other. Starmer will pick on Sunak for being an out-of-touch rich boy, whilst highlighting every boring and overused soundbite about himself going. Expect the son of a toolmaker and a nurse line to come out. Expect him to draw attention to his time at the Crown Prosecution Service. I was Director of Public Prosecutions. But what he won't draw attention to will be what people should be looking out for, which is his piss-poor leadership of the Labour Party for the last 4 years. How he's driven away or purged the left of his party, how he's rigging candidacies up and down the country, how he has presided over a hierarchy of racism whilst claiming to be rooting out anti-Semitism, seemingly in the process forgetting that there are any other forms of racism in existence in comparison. If Sunak hadn't indulged in racial attacks himself, coming from an ethnic minority as he himself does, he might have landed some blows on that, but he won't be able to now. Instead, he'll go after Starmer by bringing up Jeremy Corbyn again, I expect. He still lives rent-free in his head. But with Corbyn now expelled from the Labour Party because he's finally decided to stand as an independent to defend his seat, that's an easy shrug-off now for Starmer. He can point to the factionalism and control freakery in the Labour Party. He could even if he's really desperate, do what Boris Johnson did and play the saddle card. But ultimately, there's no effective attack for Sunak that's going to make any difference for him. Starmer's even started using private jets to get around the country despite criticising Sunak for doing just that. And even if he mentions that, it won't harm Starmer any. Starmer will still be odds-on favourite to win the election, even if he dies on his backside on stage tonight. But this is exactly why I think he's running away from the other debates. Starmer's offering absolutely nothing of note to this country. An energy company that is really just a private investment scheme, no spending on anything we actually need, no money, for example, to pull 250,000 kids out of poverty by ending the two-child benefit cap, but he has got money for nuclear weapons and putting defence first above anything else, raising defence spending to 2.5% of GDP and slapping a pension-style triple lock on nukes. And of course, decided to visit BAE Systems as part of pushing that policy, who are of course complicit in arming Israel in their genocide of Gaza, providing parts for jets. So of course Starmer went there, didn't he? There are so many issues Starmer falls short on. His priorities are appalling when so many live hand to mouth in the sixth richest economy on the planet. But this is precisely why he has nothing to fear from Sunak and everything to fear from every other party. They will shred him on every front for being too gutless to put forward actual change, despite using the word change as his literal election slogan, and their offers to the country will be far better than Starmer's. It's now in doubt apparently as to whether Sunak will do that party leaders show as well, given he'd be leaving himself open as a target for all of the rest, though I would suggest the empty chair Starmer will apparently have will remain just as big a target, and the host cannot go down the road of saying we can't attack Labour because the leader isn't there, because that will have been his conscious choice, betting on avoiding the debate entirely as being less damaging than attending, and as far as that goes, people should all be questioning why that ends up being his priority. Usually it is the incumbent party of government whose leader runs a mile to avoid defending their record on live TV. Starmer hasn't even made it into power yet, and he's lied so much he's already running away from his own record. If we end up with a show of just the Lib Dems, the Greens, the SNP, Plaid Cymru and Reform, then it should absolutely still go ahead. People deserve to hear from them and what their visions are for what they represent. And they should be free to attack the lousy offers being put forward by the Tories and Labour and compare them to what they are putting forward instead. Though, of course, I'd omit Reform from any semblance of positivity, especially now it is back to being just a vehicle for eternal attention seeker and 7 times a failure wannabe MP Nigel Farage, who is already getting BBC coverage almost daily anyhow. Now, the sort of real problem Starmer would have on such a debate show with smaller parties will be from the likes of the Greens, which is probably why the BBC are going above and beyond to avoid having them on as much as possible. Sure, this 7-way debate is happening, however many of them end up showing up, but it is supposed to be followed up with debates with party leaders one-on-one, yet the Greens have been dropped from this, as applied as of Reform as it happens, which the BBC will no doubt point out even as Nigel Farage is chuntering away on one of the BBC TV or radio channels for the 7th time in as many days. Ask yourself why the BBC are hell-bent on not platforming anyone not sticking to mainstream political views and establishment interests, and ask yourself if you're not getting ripped off paying the licence fee if that's what they are determined to serve up to you by way of debate. The Greens have an actual elected MP in Parliament, not just a defector like Reform, and they have over 100 times the number of councillors around the country, but sure, we'll out Farage again. Starmer doesn't want parties like the Greens to point out just how rubbish his policies are because they offer something so much better, which more and more people are responding to as they chase their second MP, which looks likeliest to come from Bristol right now, Carla Denyer, one of the co-leaders. And of course they've been gaining local councillors like no tomorrow as more and more people see them as a viable alternative. That is what the BBC is shutting down. That is what Starmer doesn't have an answer to and is running away from. One such example would be their 5-point plan to deal with the cost of living crisis and put more money back in your pocket. First off, they'd have a wealth tax, change their tax system, tax wealth. This costs nothing to implement and would raise another £50 billion a year. Why won't the bigger parties do it? Why won't Starmer do it if he's all about change? Well, because it would mean taxing donors more. He's putting party before country despite insistently saying the opposite. That would then pay for the second of their 5 points, a green investment programme that actually is green. There wouldn't just be a PFI for energy cartels, but actually nationalised renewable energy as one part. Thirdly, more of that money raised would be used to invest in the sorely underfunded health and social care system. Fourth, It would allow local councils to access cash to make homes more energy efficient and build more of them. And fifth, they'd use that money to cut VAT on hospitality and cultural sectors. All good things we can all benefit from. Wealth redistribution should be a vote winner for everyone. It should absolutely be the single biggest vote-winning policy anyone could put forward, because the wealth distribution in this country is so unequal. The wealthiest in this country have become ever more rich under the Tories, as we've all become more and more poor, and still neither the Tories or Labour will countenance taxing that wealth, more wealth than they've ever had before, and use that money to free themselves up to spend on the things we all need as a society, because both parties are effectively bought and paid for. A vote for the Tories or Labour is a vote for their donors, and when it is just one set of donor-backed politicians versus another, it's easy to see why Starmer could find the wherewithal to debate those like him, but not actually those with something worth saying. That needs hearing, yet instead is getting silenced by the actions of establishment politicians and client mainstream media. Starmer is pathetic, and we didn't need a TV debate to know that already. However, the debates end up going. The picture at local level across the country is a varied one for Labour. Many independents are springing up to challenge his candidates, and local people are disgusted at having people imposed on them that they did not select if they were members or are not local at all, know nothing of the area, and that they are, well, frankly, being treated with contempt by having foisted upon them a candidate who will do nothing for them. It's just a vehicle for the National Party to get this individual into Parliament. Such is the case with pro-Israel fanatic Luke Akers being pushed on the people in North Durham, and while they aren't having any of it, as this video recommendation will explain all about, his campaign launch was just about as bad as any I've ever seen, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.